Let's be real, using most Web3 platforms nowadays feels like a checklist of stuff you never asked for. Needing to install a browser extension, needing to trust a centralized wallet company, needing to give up your personal information to set up an account, also known as KYC, Know Your Customer, and praying that nothing breaks along the way. This is not user-friendly at all and not conducive to a nice Web3 experience. Here's what you don't need if you decide to use Qortal instead of these platforms. Let's get into it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let's go. The first thing to know about Qortal is that it's not KYC, meaning you don't need to give up any piece of ID to start using it, your real name, your address, your phone number. There's no personal information needed to create an account on Qortal. You can do so completely anonymously, and you can create as many accounts as you want. All you need to have is a good password to remember and a flash drive to back up your account. That's it. The second thing you don't need when using Qortal, a centralized Chrome wallet. Yes, Qortal has a browser extension of its own, but this is just an alternative user interface which has no centralized points of failure. Instead, these centralized Chrome wallets such as MetaMask, Phantom Wallet, and the countless others out there are all tied to centralized servers and use centralized servers to back up your private keys. This is not secure in any sort of fashion. On Qortal, we don't have any of those problems since you could use a user interface that is completely separate from the normal internet, meaning that there's no third parties involved. The third thing you don't need when using Qortal is to use a centralized exchange to acquire QORT. Most Web3 projects require you to sign up for a centralized exchange to acquire some of their tokens, whether that be Binance, Coinbase, Kraken, or any of the other major centralized exchanges. This is obviously KYC, Know Your Customer, meaning that you will have to give up personal information to do so. Furthermore, you are stuck using a wallet that's centralized and that can be potentially frozen or lost. There's a lot more risk to it. With Qortal, to acquire some QORT, you don't need to use any centralized exchange. You can simply use QTrade, which is a Q app found on Qortal, where you could trade QORT against 6 other coins. So for example, if you have some Litecoin, you can trade it for some QORT using a atomic trade, whereby you remain in full control of your Litecoin and then of your QORT the entire time. There are no third parties involved. This is much more secure and much more streamlined, in my opinion, than having to use a centralized exchange. And the fourth thing you don't need when using Qortal is the need to have an expensive mining rig or staking rig in the case of Ethereum. So anybody can run a full node on Qortal. They could use something as small as a Raspberry Pi, and there are no monetary constraints to do so. Anybody can do so as long as they are admitted into the mentorship group. In terms of other Web3 projects, this is not the case. Only people with a lot more money or a lot more stake in the project can run a node and validate transactions on the chain. In the case of Qortal, it's a lot more free, more fair, more distributed, and anybody can earn some QORT for validating transactions on the chain. So these were the 4 main things that you don't need when using Qortal. You don't need any KYC. You don't need to use any centralized Chrome wallet. You don't need to use a centralized exchange, and you don't need an expensive mining or staking rig. Let me know in the comments below what else Qortal does so much better than all other Web3 projects. And in the meantime, don't forget to install Qortal and start using it today by visiting Qortal.dev, and I'll see you on Qortal. See you there.